turning to Ukraine, where President Zelensky is again pleading to the U.S. for renewed military funding. A bill that includes more military assistance remains stuck on Capitol Hill. Earlier today, moderate Republican Congressman Mike Lawler told CNN that he was optimistic a vote on funding could hit the House floor soon.
I believe there will be a vote when we get back from the Easter recess. Certainly, this is critically important for our allies. We are the leader of the free world, and we cannot shirk on our responsibility to uphold and defend democracies across the globe.
Russia has launched multiple attacks last week targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure, large cities, and the southern area of Kharkiv. With me now is retired Air Force Colonel Cedric Leighton. Colonel, good to see you. He's CNN military analyst. All right, with all this, activity or lack thereof on Capitol Hill over renewed funding, when will it come to the point when it is just too late for Ukraine?
That's a really good question, Frederica, and happy Easter to you. There are so many different aspects to this that we really have to consider. But one of the big problems is that the Russians have a chance, especially with the way they're mobilizing their force. They have a chance to potentially exploit some of the small gains that they have made in recent weeks. And that would be particularly critical around the area of the small town of Divka, which is basically at the confluence of the southern and the eastern fronts in the Ukraine-Russia war. So right in that corner is basically where a lot of that could happen. It could also happen around the city of Kharkiv, which is in the northeast of Ukraine, right near the Russian border, only about 30 or so miles from the Russian border. And those areas could very well see some concentrations of Russian forces. And if those concentrations move forward, if the Russians have organized themselves in such a way that they can exploit the Ukrainian weaknesses, then we could see some changes in the territorial map for Ukraine in terms of where the forces are and where the Ukrainians will have to lay down their defenses and move their front lines.
Earlier today, we learned that Vladimir Putin is setting the largest mandatory military enlistment since the beginning of the war, 150,000 new soldiers. What does that tell you about the state of affairs for Russia, their strategy, and, really the fallout that might come from that?
Yes, this is going to be another aspect that is going to really tax the Russian war machine. The Russians have basically taken about almost 600,000, really around 580,000 conscripts into this war since the start of the latest phase in February of 2022. So with that said, the 150,000 gets them pretty close to 700,000 troops that they have conscripted for this effort. That does not include the active duty elements that are basically the volunteer forces of Russia. So these efforts really are designed to take the Russian strategy of moving as many men as possible to the front that they can. These people are going to be inexperienced. These soldiers are going to be very inexperienced for the most part, and they're going to really be used as cannon fodder. That Russian strategy has not changed. And apparently it will not change as the course of this war continues.
All right, fascinating. Colonel Cedric Leighton, thank you so much, and happy Easter to you as well.
France says it will send hundreds of second-hand armoured vehicles to Ukraine. In an interview with the French media, the country's Minister of Armed Forces says the vehicles will be old but still functioning. He also says France is preparing to send surface-to-air missiles to Ukraine, which will provide critical defence against Russian airstrikes. Russia is calling up 150,000 civilians for military service, the country's largest conscription goal since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. All Russian men are required to serve in the military for a year from the age of 18, and twice a year Russia calls up new conscripts for service. In July 2023, Russian lawmakers voted to raise the maximum conscription age from 27 to 30. Military officials say conscripts will not be involved in the war in Ukraine. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken travelling to Europe this week. He'll start in Paris, where he'll meet with the French President Emmanuel Macron to discuss support for Ukraine, the war in Gaza and the security crisis in Haiti. Blinken will later travel to Belgium for the NATO foreign ministers' meeting. CNN international diplomatic editor Nick Robertson joins me now. So is Ukraine the top of the agenda for this trip?
It seems to be. I mean, it's, as we heard from one of the congressmen speaking there, that this is something that the United States needs to steady its allies, because Europe, the European Union, of which, of course, France is a member, has put up many tens of billions of dollars over a period of years to support Ukraine, give Ukraine the knowledge that this money is coming so it can build and plan its defences, and in particular the surface-to-air missiles, which can help protect it from some of the attacks from Russia. What Blinken will likely do is tell Macron that the US this White House is still efforting getting that money to help match what the Europeans are doing. But these are sensitive political issues. I think, we heard from the French Armed Forces Minister there. You mentioned that there's hundreds of armoured vehicles, not new, but old, serviceable, working. But the sell for the French public on that, he said, look, this is more than $3 billion in money here that's going to Ukraine, but this is not a blank check. When these old vehicles go, this is the amount of money we'll be giving to the military industries to replace those products. So these are sensitive issues at home for the French, for the United States, other allies. But is Blinken actually going to be able to sit across the table and tell Macron, yes, our $60 billion for Ukraine to match yours from the European Union is coming? No, it's not in a position to do that. So this is going to be a difficult moment.
And Macron's been outspoken as well, obviously, about Gaza. So what will be the talking point there?
Yeah, I think what the French can bring to the table here, and what the United States and Secretary Blinken will be looking for, will be support, perhaps to bring what influence France can bear in Lebanon, because we know that the Israeli government has been saying, look, there's a limited time window available to fix our northern border problem. About 100,000 people are still evacuated from their homes along the northern border because of the escalation in attacks from Hezbollah across the border. So Macron earlier in the year has spoken about this when Israel struck at a Hamas leader and killed him inside Beirut. Macron was very clear that Israel must not escalate that problem. But what can the French do? Well, they do have some diplomatic influence inside Lebanon. And the US has a negotiator, Emil Hochstein, has been working to try to de-escalate that tension. But the sense is, people have been talking about the middle of April as a potential deadline whereby Israel says, this Hezbollah problem, we have to go after it. Well, if the French can bring leverage on the Lebanese side to try to just tamp down the already existing high tensions, then that can give the negotiators a little bit more time.
I also mentioned that Haiti will probably come up. It just shows how much pressure there is on the US to continue staying involved in all of these foreign issues, and their resources being spread thin when there's so much opposition to that type of thinking in Washington. And
when the division politically is towards, potentially, if there's a Republican victory, would be a more isolationist the United States. So this is something that the Democrats understand and have to respond to that level of public opinion as well, or do respond to that level of public opinion. So absolutely, the United States is scratching around to make sure that its allies are lined up. And of course, the biggest place that it may need its allies in the future will be any potential confrontation or escalation in tensions with China, which, if the United States can't put up the money to support Ukraine and isn't able to tamp down tensions itself with Israel, between Israel and Hamas, what will it expect its allies to do if its allies don't think it's doing enough on those issues? What will it expect its allies to do when the call goes out for help with an escalation of tensions with China?
OK, Nick, thank you so much.